Yesterday, we talked about the cost of avoiding change in midlife. And I think it's easy to kind of push back on that with the argument that, well, I want to enjoy life too, Courtney. Yeah, I hear you. And we all do, right? That's very human. And so today's episode, I really want to talk about the dose of the things that we do that are not healthy because it matters. Having a glass of wine is not the problem. Skipping a workout is not the problem. Staying up too late on a Friday night is not the problem. The problem is never the single instance. The problem is the dose. How often, how consistently, how automatically. And the only person who actually knows the honest answer to that question, of course, is you. Welcome to your daily hit of grace and grit, your quick dose of inspiration to kickstart your day. I'm Courtney Townley, and here is today's hit. So what does dose actually mean? Well, in medicine, the principle is simple, right? The dose makes the poison. Water is essential for life. Drinking enough of it, or you have to drink enough of it or you'll die. Sunlight is life-giving, but too much of it can cause serious damage. Virtually anything in the wrong dose becomes harmful, and virtually anything in the right dose can be manageable. We apply this principle to medications and supplements without question. We almost never apply it to our everyday habits, and that is a significant oversight because the habits that erode our health over time are rarely dramatic. They're quiet. They're small. They are individually defensible. It is only in the accumulation, in the dose, that the damage becomes visible. So one late night does not disrupt your health. Consistently poor sleep over years absolutely does. One skipped workout, totally irrelevant. A pattern of avoidance compounded over months, that is not irrelevant. One drink, your liver can tolerate that. For the right person, right? I'm not saying all people should be drinking. But if you are someone who enjoys alcohol, an occasional drink, that's why you have a liver, to help you process toxins, right? But a drink every night or multiple nights a week to take the edge off year after year is a different conversation entirely. The single instance is almost never the problem. The dose is the problem. The dose is something that only you can accurately count, right? Not your doctor, not your coach, not your partner. No one's tracking your life to the degree that you might be. But you know how often you're actually skipping workouts. Not the story you tell, I've been really busy lately, but the honest answer. You know how many nights a week the drink becomes 2 or 3. You know how often the excuse is legitimate and how often it's just the path of least resistance dressed up as a reason. Nobody else has access to that information. And most of us, if we are being truly honest with ourselves, have a gap between the story we tell about our habits and the reality of what we're actually doing. The gap is not a moral failing by a long shot, okay? It's human. But it's also where the dose problem lives and where the work of self-leadership begins. So I'm going to call out just a few of the most common ways the dose sneaks up on us. 1, I deserve this, right? This is something we use a lot. I deserve this. After a hard day, a hard week, a hard season, the reward becomes the drink, the skip, the indulgence. And look, you do deserve rest and pleasure. But when the reward is always the same thing, and that thing is slowly working against your health, the dose has become the problem. It's become the poison. It's just this once. It's something we say a lot, right? Except it wasn't just this once. It was also last week and the week before. And the individual instance feels like an exception, but it really becomes a pattern. I've been really good lately, right? This is another thing I hear a lot. And this one's subtle because we use periods of discipline to justify periods of excess. as a way of keeping the average exactly where it's always been and calling it balance. So the way that I always say this to my clients is, it's like we're doing enough work to feel like we should be getting a result, but we're also not doing just enough work to not get anywhere. And that's maddening. It's a really frustrating place to be. So none of what I'm talking about here is about perfection. It's about honesty. It's about being willing to look at the actual dose rather than the story about the dose. So a few things that I think can go a long way in helping us to mind the dose. Number one, track. If you are not really sure, you kind of have a suspicion that a certain behavior might be in too high of a dose, track it honestly, even briefly. We've talked about food journaling before on this show, right? We talked about it earlier this month. And the same principle applies here. When you actually log how often something is happening, the gap between your story and reality becomes impossible to ignore. Even 2 weeks of honest tracking can be revolutionary for a lot of people. Keep asking yourself, not did I deserve a break tonight, but how many times this week did I make the same choice? The individual decision always feels justified, but the pattern doesn't. Notice when excuses become automatic. If you always have a reason, and the reason always leads to the same outcome, that's not a reason. That's a habit in disguise. And give yourself credit for the dose that you're getting right. Right? This isn't about cataloging everything that you're doing wrong. It's also about seeing clearly the whole picture honestly, so you can make conscious decisions rather than automatic ones. Nobody's perfect, right? That's not ever what any of these episodes are about. The occasional late night, the skipped workout, the glass of wine, none of that is the issue. Again, the issue is the dose, and you are the only one who knows what your dose actually is. Not the story, the reality. Mind the dose. Because in health, as in medicine, it's almost always the difference between what helps and what harms. If this stirred something inside of you, imagine what a whole book of clarity and courage could ignite. The Consistency Code, a midlife woman's guide to deep health and happiness, goes even deeper into the mindset and practices that create real, meaningful change at midlife. Grab your copy today over at theconsistencycode.com and keep the momentum alive.